Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Fluently Forward. Today, we are the forward thinkers because we are going to be talking about the number 3 podcast in the world right now. You've probably already been talking about it. I feel like if you're into the same stuff as me, but it's called the Telepathy tapes, and it's taking the world by storm. And it's basically, we're going to go into a little bit of an intro about it, but it's this podcast series that kind of delves into these claims, suggesting that nonverbal autistic individuals, mostly children, but individuals, may possess telepathic abilities. Like, I get shivers just thinking about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the podcast, the pro podcast people, the neg podcast people, the skeptics, and then the bulk of it, because it is me, is going to be all of these different conspiracies and theories around everything to do with telepathy. And there is so much in there, like all the way from the CIA and their curiousness about telepathy. The CIA, they're just like us, and the ways that telepathy might be trying to be used for wartime. Perhaps it already is. Animals and telepathy, how we can achieve telepathy ourselves, all of these cool theories about it. It is just such a cool topic. I mean, like, what kid, it's the something, telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, Teletubbies, television, everything, tell the world. I mean, what kid hasn't wanted to read someone's mind? And what paranoid, anxious child like myself hasn't been terrified that people could read my mind? Or, just as a little kid staring at the table and trying to get something to move. I used to sweat over trying to do that. And this new podcast is kind of, exciting a lot of people, me included, to this idea that something that we've kind of considered magic or something that we can't do could be entirely possible. So let me give you guys a little bit of an intro about the Telepathy Tapes podcast series. Granted, I think there's like 9 or 10 episodes. I think I'm only on episode 7. I tried to get through it, but it's a lot of listening. So it's this series where basically it's led by this documentary filmmaker, Kai Dickens. And she works with this woman whose name I'm forgetting. I'm so sorry, but she's like a professor of something. And she was looking into nonverbal autistic children who were savants. And even just the concept of a savant is so crazy because they were saying that there's some children, under the age of 4 who know or can understand all of these different languages, or people who can just pick up calculus one day. That was the opposite of me, okay? Pick it up one day. I couldn't even pick it up after so many sessions after school with a tutor. Or children who can do these equations in their head. And not only can they do the equation, but if the answer is 30 decimal point 5921784, they know all of the decimal points within 50 digits or something insane like that. Maybe it's because I've always, I'm the opposite of a savant. I have to work really hard with the tutor to try to grasp concepts. Just that alone is so mind-blowing. So anyway, this woman was studying savants. And I also don't know how accurate, all of the information in the podcast is. We're going to get, into some of kind of the criticism of it later. But I think she said that 10% of all autistic people are savants. That kind of sounds like, I don't know what the definition of savant is. I don't know that 10% number. Anyway, but so she was studying savants, this woman, and she started to get all of these messages from a lot of mothers of nonverbal autistic children throughout the world. And all of the messages and emails were the same. And they were saying, look, I know that this sounds crazy, but I've had this feeling for years that my child is reading my mind. I don't believe in telepathy, anything like that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a mother-child connection or something, but I swear to God, there's been so many moments where they can read my mind. And thousands of these emails were coming through. And it was from a bunch of mothers, mostly, who were saying I don't really want to talk about this. I know that it sounds crazy, but I am telling you, I have had these experiences. So they started doing these tests, the telepathy tests. And part of me wonders if they call them tests rather than experiments, because maybe there's some sort of scientific definition that wasn't being passed And I'm just going to say here, if you're like the scientific validity of this, I talk about if Taylor Swift is a girl kisser on here mostly. So like, I just don't know. Okay. I'm not going to pretend to. But anyway, they started doing these tests where basically they bring in a child and their mother, and they have the child like in a different room at some points, or blindfolded, or, looking away from whatever's happening. And they do all of these tests where, let's say they pull out a calculator and they'll say, 1,000,004 times 37, come up with a number. The mom will look at it, and then the child, either with the blindfold on or all the way across the room, or sometimes in a fucking different room, will spell out or say or type, we're going to get into the different methods that they do it, the exact number. And for most of these cases, you're like, well, was it statistically significant? How often were they doing this? For most cases, it was fucking 100%. And I think the total percentage they came up with was 98%. Which is obviously very statistically significant. They do all of these different experiments. Sometimes too, they open up a book to a random page, and the child, with just the mother looking at the book, will be able to say what page the book is open to and what word they're pointing at. And it's nothing that could be replicated, because sometimes, the experimenter herself, she once brought a book that was written by her uncle. So like no one in the world would know it. And the kid was like, page 97, you're pointing to the word chicken, or something like that. Like unbelievable stuff where everyone in the room, their mouth is open. Even the camera people are like, what the fuck am I witnessing? And something that really stuck out to me, because I mentioned this over on Patreon, I'm certainly not neurotypical, okay? And I remember, like, this is going to freak my family out because this is like a big thing among us. When I was a little kid, I was into the Harry Potter books. I mean, what kid isn't? And there was like a party trick that my family would do when people were over, where they would just open up the Harry Potter books to any random page, and it could be any Harry Potter book, and they would read a sentence, and I would be able to recite the sentences that came after that. And I didn't have the books memorized. This wasn't like, oh, I could tell you it from start to finish. I don't know how, I don't know what. My mom opened up the book. I could read the sentences that came after it. So when my friend was telling me about this podcast and she talked about the book part of it, I was like, oh my God, like I have to dive into it. And they're talking all throughout this podcast. They're like, can the child see through their mother's eyes? Are they reading the mom's mind? And there was this crazy experiment where there's this random image generated and they show it to the mother. And the image was kind of one of those like weird, AI images that isn't actually something, like it's not a Norman Rockwell painting. It's kind of like a blur. And the, main woman on this podcast was saying she looks at the image and it looks like ketchup and mustard after a food fight or something, splattered on the floor. And the child spelled out PAINT, paint. So even though the mom wasn't thinking it was paint, she was thinking, it looks like the remnants of a food fight or something, the kid saw what the image was and then spelled it out. So it's not reading her mind, because she would have been saying food fight, but it was seeing the image. Now, as the podcast goes on, there's all of these crazy things, because it's like, can you read your mom's mind? Can you see everything that's going on in this room? With one kid, they were able to read the mind, whatever, just like stay with me here, okay? I've done enough caveats here. Read the mind of the cameraman, right? He was thinking like one word. I think it was like planet in his head, and the kid typed out planet, like crazy shit like that. Then we go into other episodes and we find out from some of these kids, this will send shivers down your butt crack, that there is a place called the Hill. And all of these nonverbal kids who apparently can engage in telepathy will, in their mind, it was almost giving me Stranger Things vibes, when 11 puts on the helmet and she's in like the black room, where they go to the hill and they can chit chat with other kids in their mind who also have this gift. And it's not like they're in the same room. They don't even have to be in the same fucking zip code, and they can meet up and talk with each other like on this hill. And there were stories of like two kids who are in a relationship and how they talk on the hill to each other, even though they like live across the state, like all of this crazy stuff. So anyway, you got to go check out the pod. I need to finish it, honestly, but it was just this unbelievable thing. And I think it's also, it's hard to say, right? Because there's some people who are like, your disability is a superpower. And then this kind of veers into the territory of like a legitimate superpower. But then even then, you don't know what even is the definition of a superpower. Like that's something that we made up, and maybe we made it up because we don't know that we're aware of it, right? So like certain things like superheroes can fly. Oh my God, that's a superpower. You can fly. But animals can fly. We can fly in an airplane. Like these are things that exist on Earth, but then we also call them superpowers when a human does it. But maybe that's because we don't know that humans can do stuff like that. Now, the main criticisms about this, and oddly enough, they weren't talked about in episode 1, but then in episode 2 or 3, they were like, by the way, this was happening in episode 1, which I found a little interesting. They make it seem in the podcast like these experiments are just happening and the kid is like, blue, number 2, like giraffe, all of this stuff. But I paid the $10 for the paywall to see the videos of these experiments. And as they talk about in the later episodes, there is something, and shout out to Mandy on Patreon, who like walked me through a lot of this. The communication techniques that almost all of the children used are facilitated communication and then the modern version of spelling to communicate. So for a lot of these kids, they're pointing or they're spelling out letters to make a word, which, I was listening to it and I was like, well, that makes sense. These kids are nonverbal, right? So that's how they're going to communicate what they're thinking or feeling or anything like that. But it seems like there's a lot of hairy stuff that goes on with this. Seems like the better method is something called AAC devices, and then different therapists and stuff like that. There's different, quote unquote, better, more effective ways to communicate. And there's been all of these weird things that happen because, honestly, even just, me and my best friend or boyfriend talking, wires get crossed with communication. Of course it does with this. So I just know that there's a lot of stuff around the communication techniques. I don't have time to dive into it. I still need to listen to the rest of the fucking podcast. So for today, we're mostly going to be talking about telepathy and stuff like that. And then, of course, there were people saying this whole thing is a grift, like the fact that the parents are touching the children as they answer means that they're guiding them or moving them, almost kind of like a Ouija board to point out what it is. Now, that being said, I watched the videos on the website, and one mother was like holding her finger to her daughter's forehead as she did it. Another has the hand on the arm. I really, after watching the videos, I just don't think that could be the case. And if it is the case, then telepathy as a miracle is out. And what's in as a miracle is that all of these mothers, thousands of them from around the world, were so excited that they could grift that they ended up emailing this professor. The professor takes them in for experiments, and then just by, a simple finger on the child, they're able to guide their nonverbal autistic child to guess long digit numbers or, pages on a book. So if you really think that that is the grift, that's crazy. Like, I don't think me and my best friend of 15 years, her finger on me, could make me go, oh, the digit is 67921. So who knows? I think the minute you say the word telepathy, a lot of people are going to be like, I don't know about that. And then another interesting skeptical point here before we really just get into the woo-woo stuff, which I love, is something that I'm very interested in. So they were saying that people who are, autistic people and most neurodivergent people in general, they have this ability to see patterns and interactions in a way that like typical or normal people wouldn't. They're really, really good at pattern recognition. I like to consider myself, you've probably noticed it in the podcast, right? Like over on the Patreon, I remember we did these 2 episodes that were really big on pattern recognition for me, but in a crazy way. One was about how celebrity men with gay allegations usually date older women, because I was like, Nick Jonas and Shawn Mendes and Harry Styles, like they have gay allegations, but they're always with older women. And why is that? Does that mean blah, blah, blah? Or we did an episode about plastic surgery with the ugly sister, and how I don't think it's a coincidence that Khloe Kardashian, Kylie Jenner, Bella Hadid, these are all female celebrity women who came into the spotlight. Everybody said, oh my God, your sister is so much hotter than you. They completely transformed how they looked with a lot of plastic surgery. And then all 3 of these women also end up in a lot of relationships where they're consistently cheated on. What's the pattern there? Is there something you could, get from it? But anyway, they're basically saying that neurodivergent people, they're just really good at seeing a lot of potential outcomes of certain situations. And even though for most autistic people, you might not have the same social skills to the same variety as like neurotypical people, but you can judge a lot more from facial expressions. So I've heard a lot from my autistic friends. They're like, I don't know why I offended someone, but I can definitely tell when they're offended. And I think neurodivergent people too, they pick up on the facial expressions, they pick up on the tone of voice, it's almost kind of similar to what like victims of abuse do, or if you grew up with an angry parent in your household, you're probably way more attuned to the sound of footsteps going up and down the stairs or what each person moving throughout the house sounds like. You just pick up on like way more of it. So some people were saying like, it's the type of thing where it's like, yes, I think people who are neurodivergent are really good at pattern recognition, but what the fuck there's no pattern recognition in the world where it could be like, I opened up a random book, there was a picture of a pirate on it, and the kid with the blindfold on fucking knew that there was a pirate on the page. I think it's telepathy. I just do. I'm a believer. And I do think it's interesting how this pattern recognition that neurodivergent people have, which leads them to predict outcomes of a situation and maybe come to it faster or more accurately than other people. It's kind of interesting because that's almost how AI works. So, sometimes you'll watch a YouTube video and then that YouTube video halfway through, you're like, oh man, this is triggering something in me to go watch a different YouTube video. You go to the search bar to type it in, and with just the first letter, it already pops up. And that's because AI is also, good at pattern recognition, collecting data, trying to predict outcomes. So if you're watching like a Tyla music video and you're like, man, this is kind of reminding me of the Panda Replay Rihanna music video, you go and you type in P, that's going to pop up, and it feels for a second like your computer is reading your mind, but really it's just pattern recognition and using data to like make predictive outcomes. Okay, so all of the skeptics and stuff aside, let's now strap on our crazy pants and get into all of the conspiracy theories and real theories about telepathy, because my God, they are cool. Okay, so I've broken this down into maybe like 10 different little sections. The very first thing I want to talk about is that the CIA has in fact studied telepathy before, and there's always a bunch of declassified documents that nobody wants to read through because they're pretty boring, but there are 3 here, and then some more that we have going into about the CIA and their interest in telepathy. So one of the declassified documents that you can find on literally one of those websites, like they release it to the public, is a document called Telepathy Could Be Real. And this is a document that just kind of explores the possibility of telepathic communication, noting that 58% of Americans believe that at one point they have experienced telepathy. And then it just kind of discusses research efforts to study these individuals and see if their results exceed chance expectations. There's another declassified document from September 1975 called Telepathic Behavior Modification. And this document is examining Soviet research into behavior modification through telepathy. So it was different studies that the Soviets did from the 1920s to the 1970s, and it was all about how you could use telepathy to alter human activity, either in a good way or a bad way. And then the third declassified document is called Telepathic Hypnosis. And then this also, once again, is about more studies conducted in Russia, in Moscow and Leningrad, if that's how you pronounce it. Laboratories that were all about the ability to control a person's consciousness through telepathy. So that over on the Patreon, we did this whole episode about the Stargate project, which is when the CIA was legit fucking interested in and spending money on ESP, telepathy, and remote viewing. So this all happened kind of around the Cold War time. And I'm going to sound crazy when I say this, but all of this is true, okay? Crazy, but true. The Nazis were super into, just that sentence there, I feel crazy already, but the Nazis were super into astrology, the occult, trying to find hollow earth. Like they would have listened to this podcast. Like they were into all of that type of conspiracy woo-woo shit. And they were doing a lot of studies on it. And apparently after World War II, when everything got split up kind of between the Russia and the US, this is when we also talked about Operation Paperclip over on Patreon. We got a lot of Nazi scientists basically that were absorbed into NASA. and we pardoned them and used them, and they helped get us to the moon. I sound crazy, but this is like a whole episode over on Patreon. One of the things that allegedly got split up were all of these documents about ESP and like psychic things that the Nazis were studying. So a lot of these documents went over to Russia. So when we were having this Cold War, it was like, yes, it's a space race. Yes, it's a nuclear arms race. And yes, most people don't know this, but there was also kind of this like ESP psychic race that was going on too. So basically around the 1960s, we as the US, we were like, you know what? I think Russia is doing all of this stuff with psychics and they're trying to develop cybernetic telepathy, and we have to try to beat them at their game. So that was when the CIA put together the Stargate project. And they worked with people who said that they had psychic abilities to try and harness that for, of course, like espionage and wartime activity. So they had some really good results from this. There were some US citizens that were a part of the Stargate project, and they were able to, you know, in their psychic way, two of the most amazing things from this is that they were able to map out and draw what this Russian base looked like, where they were like trying to get into. And it was like an exact fucking replica of it. And then another success story was that this plane had like been downed somewhere in Russia. And this psychic was able to map the exact coordinates where the plane was. And that was how they located the plane. Like, mind blown. Now, the official story is that the success rate was only about 30%, so the CIA was like, oh, it's not worth it, and they shut it down. That's what they say, okay? They say that the project ran from the 1970s to the 1990s. I think if you find a plane with a person, you keep using that person, and I think you just tell everyone the program was shut down. But if I was the CIA, I would be like, we're going to work on this and try to make it much better. Now, I also think that I might be right about that theory because in November of 2020, it came out, quote, the U.S. Army Research Office is funding new research into how brain signals could be analyzed and decoded to create a silent communication channel, aka fucking telepathy, for military personnel. And this was a research program back in November 2020 that was announced. It was backed by the research office, and it was led by the University of Southern California researchers, other colleagues in that area. And the U.S. Army was providing $6.25 million in funding over 5 years for this moonshot research project that basically was going to use like algorithms and advanced mathematics to try and separate brain signals that, quote, influence action or behavior from signals that do not. And they did tests with like these fucking monkeys. They said that, you know, the system making it suitable for military purposes is likely decades away. But basically, they wanted to use telepathy where if you're a soldier and you're out on the ground and you want to tell, what is it, a platoon, another group of soldiers, you know, fucking miles away, hey, we're going to take a rest for the night, or hey, let's go meet up in the mountains or whatever. They want it so that way you can do it in your fucking mind. And one of the things that I found so insane about this is that when I'm listening to the telepathy tapes, I'm like thinking about it in a Mother Nature type of way, a very womanly sense. I'm like, wow, the world could be healed if we could understand each other with telepathy and think of all that we could do, and we could bridge the gap between people who speak different languages. And the United States is like, we could use this for war. We could probably use this for soldiers somehow. And what's really crazy too is that we might actually be behind. Because do you want to know who already does this? Fucking animals, right? You know, like when wolves are going to attack and bring down a sheep. Okay, let's just say they're going to bring down a sheep. When you watch those videos of animals and packs hunting, it's almost like they already have telepathy, okay? They're not shouting out commands. They're not on WhatsApp. But it's like this perfect choreographed dance where the one wolf will go to the left and then the other go to the right, and then the ones in the back circle around, and they all do it like they're just connected to each other. And it almost seems like this could allegedly be like what the US is trying to do with this research program. All right, let's get into another theory. This one's going to be a little bit more nice, basically. There is a theory going around that humans, early humans, ancient civilizations, were always telepathic, and they had access to this gift of telepathy that we've lost because we're on that damn phone all the time or whatever. So what's really cool about people in ancient times, especially in ancient Egypt, is there's a lot of theories and evidence out there that they were really into astral projection, astral travel, right? A lot of gods were in the sky. A lot of different cultures believe that when you die, you go up into the skies and you're projected up there. You become a star, you meet the gods, blah, blah, blah. In people in ancient times, right? I mean, there were so many things. I mean, back in the day, right? We thought that the earth was the center of the universe. Like all of this stuff was different based on or as compared to what we know now. And a lot of people in ancient times, they didn't realize that the head controlled the mind. They thought that basically like the head controlled the body. And they didn't think that the body and our consciousness is different. Is separate. They thought that it was like one and the same. So that was why a lot of people allegedly, right, wish we could talk to them, but we can't, in these ancient cultures believed that astral travel was real. So like when you close your eyes and you dream and you're somewhere, we know today, oh, I'm closing my eyes. That's my brain. That's my subconscious. I'm just imagining my dream. People back then were like, oh my God, I traveled at night to this place, like I was there in my body. And so a lot of people think too that, before the written word was created and there was language and communication, maybe early humans got on via telepathy. And this kind of goes back to the stoned ape theory, which we could do a whole theory on. But a lot of people think too, because there are some skulls out there with like a little bit of a larger of a cranial capacity than ours today. They're like, what if they were more intelligent than us, or they were able to do XYZ things? There's even some people who think that the fucking pyramids in Egypt were built using telekinesis with their mind. It would make for a very cool HBO show, wouldn't it? The next cool theory about telepathy, this one is really wild to me. It's that animals are already doing this. So we kind of talked about that with wolves and how they just kind of seem to pick up on things. Animals are fucking incredible. I'll get to more on that later. But the name of this theory is called morphic resonance, if you've heard of it. It was this concept proposed by a British biologist named Rupert Sheldrake, and it's part of his theory of morphic fields. And he basically suggests that there is this collective memory that's shared by all members of a species. And they did this they've done it across so many different species. So number one is memory and learning in rats. So there have been different studies where rats were taught to navigate mazes, which by the way, I hope reincarnation is never true. If we come back as a rat, like they put these rats to work. So anyway, these rats have to go through mazes, and then over generations, different subsequent rats know how to do that maze quicker and quicker just because a rat before them did it. And then it's their first time doing the maze and they know how to do it way better. So it's this crazy theory basically saying that knowledge acquired by earlier generations of a species can somehow be passed through to other rats through morphic resonance. This was a crazy thing too. It's not only rats and animals, fucking crystals. So they did these experiments where when a new crystal structure is formed, it becomes easier for that same structure to form elsewhere due to morphic resonance. Crystal growth, right? One crystal grows in a certain way, and in a laboratory across the world, another crystal is able to grow in that same way, which is just like mind-blowing. They've also done this with humans. They did a study seeing if people could solve crossword puzzles faster, if the puzzles had already been solved by others. And they noticed that humans were able to solve a puzzle quicker if someone else had previously solved it. Like not related to them, they didn't do it together, nothing like that. And he thinks this is because of a morphic field influence. Now, I will say, if that's true, why am I always so bad at the Wordle? I do it at midnight and I'm like horrible at it, you know? Intriguing. They also did more experiments with humans for this. They did telephone telepathy where participants would guess who was calling them before answering the phone, and the results were higher than chance accuracy, which he said could be telepathy or morphic fields. This one is crazy. They did a test with monkeys in the 1950s, and researchers observed that once a certain number of monkeys learned a behavior, like washing sweet potatoes, the behavior would spread spontaneously across groups of monkeys that weren't even fucking connected to each other, which is wild. So that is like, that just makes my hair stand on edge. And it's like, what is going on? And I think a lot of these things, we think of it as magic because we just don't understand it. And we think that we're so much better and so much smarter than everyone and everything, right? We think that we're so much smarter than humans in the past. And it's like, not really. Like, we know a little bit more, but we don't know everything. My God, we don't know everything yet. And then also something that I used to be obsessed with back when I was vegan. I consider going vegan again a lot. But anyway, is this idea that humans are like, we are the apex predators. We are the alpha. Like, we know everything. We're so much smarter than these stupid little animals. But animals have the ability to do these things that we could never do, like literally never do. They're so much smarter than us in so many ways. So I just want to list off some of the ways that animals communicate with each other, where if humans were communicating with each other in that way, it would be telepathy tapes part 2. We would be like, holy shit, this is an unbelievable discovery. So bats, they use echolocation to navigate and hunt. Dolphins, they use these high frequency clicks and these whistles to communicate in really complex ways. Elephants, so fucking cool. They communicate over long distances using these infrasonic rumbles, which can travel through the ground and the air. Ants lay these chemical trails to guide colony members to food. Bees can release alarm pheromones to warn others of danger. And moths can use their pheromones to attract mates from fucking miles away. Scent marking, so animals like wolves, cats, and deer can use these scent glands or their fucking piss, their urine, to mark their territory and convey identity, reproductive status, or health. And there's this crazy story where wolves, this woman was like researching wolves in this area, and if in a wolf pack, one of the, I don't know the proper name for it, but like the mother who's like taking care of everyone, if she dies, literally the next day, a wolf of the same gender and the same age, able to do all of the things of that female wolf who died, will just join the pack from like miles away and be like, I'm here, I'm ready to do my place. And the theory of how they can do that, it's not telepathy, but it's that the urine, I'm like obsessed with it. I'm like, the urine, my God, can be like, oh, okay, there's no more urine scent of a female leader or whatever, mother in this pack. We need one. And you can recognize it by that. Fireflies, they use this specific light pattern for mating signals. Birds, sea turtles, and honeybees can sense the Earth's magnetic field for navigation and maybe communication during migration. Birds and bees, they can see the UV patterns on flowers and different like foliage that humans can't detect. And then ants use their antenna touches to exchange information about food sources or what the colony needs and stuff like that. And just think, animals are doing this all the time. Like, it's their normal, but if we did any of that, it would be considered insane, right? If we physically touched each other, or we emitted light patterns, or we pissed in a certain area to get a message across. I mean, we do that sometimes. Like if someone takes a shit on your doorstep, like you kind of know the message they're getting across. But for the most part, it's like unbelievable, and it's insane to us because we don't understand it. But these are how animals are communicating. Now, there's a guy who's really interested in studying this when it comes to whales. So whales produce this infrasonic sounds to communicate over these vast, vast ocean distances. And there was this guy named Dr. Paul Spong. It looks like sponge without the E. I might call him just Dr. Sponge. Dr. Paul S-P-O-N-G, Sponge. Because it makes sense, because he's a marine biologist and a cetologist, like when you study ocean animals, and he did a lot of work with killer whales, orcas, and he had a lot of unconventional ideas about them, including telepathy. So he's from New Zealand, and he started his career studying animal behavior. And in the late 1960s, he was invited to work in the Vancouver Aquarium in Canada, and he studied this captive orchid named Skana. And initially, his task was to work on visual discrimination tasks with this orca, Skana, to recognize and differentiate between different objects. And soon, after a lot of these tests, he was like, damn, this orca is like really smart, like way more intelligent than I thought. she was becoming really bored with repetitive tasks and kind of signaling that she was ready to take on more cognitive tasks, basically. Like she required a different approach. So this kind of shifted his whole perspective on what he was doing. And he started to go into questioning the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity because they're way too smart for this. We need to advocate for their protection, all of this stuff. So in the 1970s, his interest turned towards exploring the communication abilities of orcas, the way that they vocalize, which is basically a bunch of like complex clicks and whistles and pulsed calls. And he started theorizing that these sounds could represent this sophisticated form of language. And then his studies led him to this deeper fascination with this idea that orcas and other ocean animals might communicate telepathically. And this was from a lot of different anecdotal reports and observations of whales seemingly acting in concert together over vast differences, even when they were separated by these large expanses of the ocean. So we did a lot of informal experiments to test this, where like humans would telepathically like ask the whales to come somewhere. And then sometimes they would come there, sometimes they wouldn't. They weren't scientifically verifiable results. So he left the Vancouver Aquarium and he just dedicated his life to whale conservation. He founded the Orca Lab Research Station in British Columbia, and he studies orcas in the wild using these non-invasive methods such as hydrophones to record their vocalizations. So he did a lot of work to kind of shift this public perception of orcas from dangerous predators to intelligent social creatures deserving of protection. Now, that being said, I think like an orca will still fuck you up. Sometimes I just wonder if if we go a little bit too far, like, yes, orcas are intelligent social creatures, and also like they will fuck you up. Like sometimes I think the PR for certain animals have been so good that like with orcas and pit bulls, it's like they're basically a child that would never do anything. And it's like any animal can fuck you up. Even a bee could fuck you up. That doesn't mean we should kill them or be harmful to them, but a lot of animals can still fuck you up, even if they are smart. Humans are intelligent social creatures and we fuck each other up all the time. Anyway, let's move on to the next theory here of telepathy. So one of the coolest things that I talked about in this podcast was this idea of the talk on the hill. Like it gives me the goosebumps how these kids were like, we go to the hill to talk to each other. And Kai, the documentarian for this podcast, was like, damn, that's crazy. You guys all go to this place called the hill to talk to each other. And at one point, she's going around and she's talking to all of these different kids all over the world, like different states, different parts of the world. There was a girl from Mexico. I know that they go down to Atlanta, Georgia. They go other places. And at one point, she's in an entirely fucking different state talking to a kid, being like, tell me more about this and your experience. And she or he, I forget who it was, they go, oh yeah, well, I talked to other kids. Oh yeah, it's called Talking on the Hill. And she's like, oh my God, my heart stopped. Like they all go to talk on the hill. And I don't know what it is. Like even, what's his name? Steven Spielberg? Who's the guy who does the creepy movie? He did Birds and Psycho. Well, whatever. Not even him could come up like the talk on the hill. I don't know why. Like, oh my God, it's just like, oh yeah, it's like crazy. But this reminded me of a story, and it has to do with drug tripping. So I remember the first time I did acid, I was like, man, what is this world? Drugs are crazy. I'm accessing things I could have never accessed before. All right. Like the first time you do drugs, like you're amazed. Same with the second time, same with the 70th. But I remember I was on Reddit looking up like different stories from people. And in San Francisco, I think at like Dolores Park or something, people would do acid. And I remember a friend telling me that he did acid and he had this like great trip. There was this red priestess woman featured in the trip, right? And he was like, whoa, like it's a great trip. And there was this like beautiful red priestess woman, blah, blah, blah. And the next day he's at the park and he sees the guy who gave him acid. And he's like, dude, great trip yesterday. Like I saw this red priestess woman. And the guy was like, yeah, like a lot of people saw her yesterday. And I was like, what the fuck? Like a lot of people saw the red priestess. And it was this idea that like when you're tripping or in a different dimension or your consciousness is, I don't know, changed a little bit, What if you access this different dimension or level or world, and people who are on that same wavelength as you are seeing it as well? So then I remember reading on Reddit, like all of these different stories about it, where someone would be like, oh, like I was tripping and I kept seeing this like purple hat, for instance, right? And they were tripping in, I don't know, Santa Fe at 4 p.m. And then someone on Reddit would be like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Like, I live in Australia and I was tripping at like 11 p.m., which is the same, time zone wise as you. I don't know if it is, just go with it. And they're like, I also saw a purple hat. Like, I kept, and these people and their trip experiences, if they did it at the same time, even if they weren't in the same location, they were seeing the same visuals. So that just like, I'm starting to freak myself out a little bit. That was just something crazy to me, because it's this idea that like you're almost plugging into the same TV channel, or you're all going to the same website. I don't know why I'm making it very techie, right? But I think that's because that's the only thing we have to relate to it, right? And this idea of telepathy, the only version we can think of as humans right now is like, I sent a text to someone and then it appeared on their phone. So anyway, I'm like giving myself the shivers right now. Anyway, this idea of these kids going to talk on the hill, it just kind of reminded me of all of these acid trip stories where people were like, yeah, when we're tripping, when we're all on the same level, the same vibe, we see the same thing in our world, even when we're across the world, which is crazy. All right, let's get into a true to form conspiracy theory here that telepathy exists and the man, capital T, capital M, is trying to hide it from people. So we are going to follow the story of a man named Dr. Jacobo Greenberg Zilberbaum. I'm not going to be pronouncing this correctly. He's a Mexican neurophysiologist and psychologist, and he studied consciousness, shamanism, and the nature of reality. And he had a very mysterious disappearance in 1994 that has fueled so much speculation and intrigue, and it's just incredible. So I'm going to call him Dr. J here. He studied psychology at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and then later post-grad studies in psychophysiology at the University of New York. And he was really inspired by his mom's untimely death, and he developed kind of this fascination with altered states of consciousness, and he wanted to explore the intersection of neuroscience and spirituality. I would sign up for that class. That sounds so fucking cool. So he developed all of these theories saying that consciousness could exist independently outside of the brain. And it was influenced by like a mixture of quantum physics and then also Eastern philosophies. So he proposed something called synergy theory, and it's a model of consciousness and reality. And he basically said that there's this universal network of consciousness that connects all beings, and that this network is underneath our physical reality. And he kept talking about something called the lattice. So he said that our brains decode reality, forming a bridge with the lattice, that our conscious thought can create changes in space-time, and that we are not spectators in reality, but we are participants. And this got me excited in a very white girl way, because I was like, oh my God, my vision boards. I was like, manifestation is real. Like, you can create your life. You truly do influence it. And I think that's a concept that a lot of people are interested in. Does life happen to me, or do I make life happen? Is my destiny already predetermined, or does every single action that I make impact my life? And I think both of those schools of thought kind of both freak me out and comfort me at the same time. Like the whole idea that my life is planned out for me, you feel like you don't have agency. It feels kind of bad. But then at the same time, I'm already burned out and I have a load of laundry to do. So great. Like, my life is already planned. I don't have to worry about that. And then on the other hand, the idea that you plan your entire life, you're 100% responsible for everything that happens to you. You have so much agency, so much potential. And then at the same time, every mistake is your mistake. Every missed opportunity is an opportunity you're not taking, but you could be taking. And I will say, when I do mushrooms, I'm like, this is a thought that I always keep coming back to. I'm like, oh, our life is whatever we make it. You get to create your own life. Anyway, it doesn't hit the same when I'm sober, but you know, when I'm at the park with my friends, I'm like, man, did I discover something? So anyway, Dr. Grinberg, he's basically saying that your mind alters the blueprint of reality itself. And this theory, obviously, kind of challenges everything that we know. It almost makes me feel a little bit like the simulation theory, right? Like we're Sims or something like that. So he conducted telepathy tests, and he proved that two brains that were meditating could sync and that they would show identical brain patterns without physical connection. And he called this phenomenon transferred potential, TP. He also did a lot of work with these Mexican shamans and saying that they could see without their eyes, that they could heal with intention and manipulate reality. And his most famous case involved someone named Pachita, Pachita, a Mexican healer who claimed to channel an ancient spirit named Cuauhtémoc, if that's how you pronounce it. I looked it up. I'm horrible at this. I'm so sorry. So then, December 8th, 1994, Dr. Grinberg vanishes. There's no sign of a struggle. There's no evidence. There's nothing. They interview the wife because they always have to interview the partner. And she claims innocent. And investigators were like, we're kind of fucking baffled. What's going on here? So there were a bunch of rumors. The CIA got involved and they killed him because he was on to discovering what makes reality reality. A rival in the area abducted him because he wanted to steal his work. He did a self-experiment. Something went wrong. There were all these rumors abound. If I was around in the time, I also would have been spreading the rumors. And there was all this weird stuff about his disappearance. Like he was scheduled to meet a friend that day, but he never arrived. And then they were like, his wife said that she saw him leave the home, but her story was kind of inconsistent. The house had no signs of a struggle, but certain personal items of his were missing. And then witnesses reported some unusual behavior from his wife a few days leading up to the incident, but she was never apprehended and her current whereabouts remain unknown. Okay? So some people think, the government took him. Some people think he staged his own disappearance because he wanted to continue his work in private. Some people think he meditated so hard he transcended reality and he thought himself into nothingness or something like that, you know? But the really crazy thing too is this idea that he's saying where it's like we are active participants in reality and our thoughts can change reality. I feel like that's not even that crazy because we hang around something every day. We all know of it. And most people act like it's normal, but it freaks me the fuck out. We did an entire public episode about 2 years about this. The placebo effect. The placebo effect. Sometimes I lay at night awake and I think of the placebo effect. Like I can take a sugar pill and because I think the sugar pill is supposed to do something, it does it. And not always does it like fix what's going on, but my symptoms go away because I think I'm taking medicine, but I'm fucking not even taking the medicine and it fixes me. Like what the fuck? Like I think of the placebo effect. I think of me fondly. I think of the placebo effect. I just think it's crazy. All right, the next theory here. Elon Musk is excited because Neuralink has entered the chat in the game of telepathy. So this happened back in March 2024. They said the first human with the Neuralink brain chip can play video games via telepathy. So we have the first human with the Neuralink computer chip. It was surgically implanted into his brain. And back in March 2024, there was this video where we were able to kind of see a demonstration of how it works. And he used his thoughts to connect to a computer. And in his, he's paralyzed, I think, from the shoulders down. And just with his thoughts, he was able to move a computer cursor around a screen. So he could play online chess. He could toggle music on and off. He was talking about how he plays video games and things like that. It was just like this unbelievable video. He said, quote, "It's all being done with my brain. If y'all can see the cursor moving around the screen, that's me, y'all. It's pretty cool, huh?" So the chip, I don't know. any shit about this, but it says that there's 1,000 electrodes programmed to gather data about the brain's neural activity and movement intention, and then send that data to a Neuralink computer for decoding to transform those thoughts into action. And he kind of references Star Wars, like the Jedi stuff. He said, quote, basically, it was like using the Force on the cursor, and I could get it to move wherever I wanted. Just stare somewhere on the screen and it would move where I wanted it to, which was such a wild experience the first time it happened. So Elon Musk, of course, has all of these grand plans for what's going to happen with Neuralink. Once again, I'm getting the shivers. Like, who knows if it's going to happen? But this idea that already, granted, something has to be implanted into your body, but that you can telepathically connect to a computer and tell it what to do just with your mind, not with any motor skills or anything like that. And then what's next? Can you connect to someone else's brain? With Neuralink inside of us, could we engage in telepathy? It's pretty wild. Also, I need to dive more into Neuralink. For some reason, I don't know why, I guess I was hopeful. I thought it would be like a tiny little chip, like when you take your SIM card out of your phone. I was like, oh, a tiny little chip. It's kind of a honker of a situation to put in your brain. Like, it looked way bigger than I thought it would. Oh my God, just... The next 10 years are going to be so fucking crazy. Like, I can't even imagine what's in store for us in the next 10 years. Yeah. All right. And then lastly, I have this under a category called the most rogue bullshit, because sometimes when I'm doing research for these episodes, I'll see a comment or something and I'm like, well, that's stupid. And then I'm like, but cool, stupid, but cool. And somebody said, like, I don't think this is true, but I just think it's fun. Someone said, I read somewhere that each president has a mental bodyguard to protect them from telepathic invasions. It's real. Do I think that this is true? No, I don't think so. Like, if I was a president, I would be like, of course, like, I want that. But I just think, once again, a lot of these conspiracies or theories or things that people talk about online, do I think it's true? No. Do I think it would make an unbelievable HBO show? Yes. A whole army of different mental bodyguards out there. Do you remember that guy on TikTok who was like, to all of the witches and people and psychics and stuff like that who believe in this shit, go ahead and hex me, go ahead and curse me. Like, this is to prove that this shit isn't real. So go ahead and curse me, like, have at it. And then the next day he was like, see, like, nobody cursed me. I'm doing totally fine. That's why. And then a bunch of other people made more TikToks and they were like, bro, that's because I've been casting protection spells around you. That's the only reason why the hexes, trust me, like, the hexes are incoming, but I've been putting up a barrier around you. And it was like this whole thing on TikTok. Oh, rip. We might be losing it. Anyway, so for the last section of this episode, I wanted to talk about, how can you and I become telepathic? Or what information is out there that, I don't know, could kind of make you flex this muscle? Is this even a muscle that we can flex? And they mentioned different moments in the podcast. And I think we've all had moments ourselves where you're like, holy shit, that was something telepathic that happened. One of the main things they reference is, I feel like this has happened to everyone, where out of the blue, you'll just be thinking of like an old college friend from college and you'll be like, damn, I wonder what's going on with them. And 5 minutes later they call you and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. I was like just thinking of you. And they've even done studies like this. There's a book called, I think it's called like How Pets Know when their owners are coming home. And it's talking about the telepathic connection between animal owners, like dog owners, and their dog. I think they also did it with cats. And they did all these crazy different experiments where, like, the minute you're at work and you think to yourself, I'm going to go home, the dog at home starts to get excited. And they did all these different experiments where you come home in different cars, you come in through the back door, the front door at different times. No matter what, the minute the person was like, I'm going to go home now, the dog at home started to get excited. And then what's even crazier on top of that is that in these experiments, if the person was like, I'm going to go home, the dog would get excited. They start to go home. And then their friend's like, hey, let's meet up for happy hour. And in their head, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do happy hour. And they don't go home. The minute they make the decision to like go to happy hour, the dog stops being excited. Like, isn't that crazy? So anyway, something else too that they mentioned in this podcast series was that some of the children would come home from school and they would want to go talk to their friends on the hill. So they would need pillows over their face, like a bunch of pillows and blankets to make it really dark, really quiet so they could focus and go to the hill. And I was like, man, okay, so what does it take to harness telepathy? Here are some ideas popping around from people. Number one, meditation and mindfulness practices. We talked about this a little bit, right? The idea that meditating brains can emit the same, I don't know, their brain scans look the same. It was something that Dr. Ginberg did. And this idea that if you're meditating, if you're super mindful, you can be more tapped into that. And then, of course, a fun conspiracy aspect of it is just how fucking far away we get from meditation and mindfulness every single day. Like, we are the generation, and it's me too, who is proud of ourselves when we watch a movie for 90 minutes without looking at our phone once. And like, if I read a book, I'm like, wow, everybody look at me. Like, anyway, so who knows? Maybe the man knows about telepathy, and that's why they invented TikTok. The second one is this idea of emotional bonds. And a lot of these stories of telepathy in the podcast were coming from children and their mother, or it would be a child and a sibling that they were really close with. So this kind of tantalizing idea that if you have a really strong emotional connection to another person, your odds for telepathy are going to be a lot stronger. Now, of course, they've done a lot of studies with that when it comes to twins. They think of close family members. They think of friends. And I've seen this too. I mean, how many times are you and your best friend thinking of the same thing? Or you already know what you want to do by just looking at each other. And once again, you could say that's pattern recognition and things like that. Me and my best friend, Bridget, we've been friends for 17 years. And multiple times we've gotten each other the same thing for Christmas. And it's like fucking so like, we thought we were getting something so special the other person wouldn't have thought of it. Just like random things like that. Another interesting thing is training brainwave synchronization with these different techniques of like, what do they call it? Binaural beats, or like different frequency sounds. You know, you go on YouTube. I remember the first time I had a hangover in college, I thought I was going to die. Like, I was actually Googling, like, can a hangover kill you? Like, do I need to go to the hospital? And I remember I was so desperado that I went to YouTube and I typed in healing sound frequency, because I was like, I will try anything. And if there's some sort of frequency pitch that's going to make me feel better, I'm going to do it. Alas, any sound at all made me vomit. So, I couldn't even do it. But what's really cool is that that's one of the things they talk about in this podcast. Tuning forks with certain pitches were helpful for this one child. He said basically that, like, boom, this one pitch or frequency, whatever the fuck it is, was the same sound that his body operated on. And then they tested all of these different tuning forks and, like, bong, that was the one that his mind operated on. Whoa, how fucking cool is that? So, I don't know, they have a lot of those frequency playlists on Spotify. If you're ever anxious, put on like a relaxing frequency. Maybe it's placebo effect, which in and of itself is like unbelievably cool. But I feel a difference when I listen to them. Yeah. All right. And then the last two that we have here, number 4 is altered states of consciousness. So this theory that you can access these altered states of your consciousness through lucid dreaming, through hypnosis, through psychedelics. And when you're in that altered state of consciousness, that you can then kind of unlock these telepathic abilities. So there's all this cool stuff too. I saw this new piece of tech that's being invented, and they were doing studies on it. I don't know if it's like if any normal person can buy it now, but I think like within the year you'll be able to. And it's this kind of like helmet that you put on your head, and it bings these can you tell, like, I know a little about everything. I know a lot about nothing, but anyway, it like bings these sounds into your head, and the frequencies or whatever the fuck the sounds are, they put you into that state that you're in right before you fall asleep, which is such a lovely state, by the way. You always get the best ideas in that state, and that helmet helps people fall asleep in like under 5 minutes, no matter what, because of the sounds, which is really crazy. Yeah. Crazy stuff. Okay, and then the fifth one is focusing on the pineal gland, the pineal gland. A lot of people call this the third eye, in spiritual traditions. And some people say that this could play a role in telepathic communication, and perhaps earlier humans were indeed using this for telepathy. So some people say that in order to keep your pineal gland, flexed to the max, that includes visualization exercises, that includes having like a diet that's just from the earth and things like that, or using crystals or meditation to activate it. This is also where we get into conspiracy territory, because if you are in any conspiracy part online and you type in the pineal gland, a lot of people are going to say that you need to stop fucking with fluoride because it calcifies your pineal gland and it makes you a sleep sheep. Wake up, bitch. Anyway, I did not say that. Other people online say that. And sometimes I want to surface what they say. So that way, if after this episode, people go and look up stuff online, they don't just see something like that and throw out their toothpaste. Okay. But anyway, this is where the theories will take you down a rabbit hole that people in ancient civilizations, man, they didn't have toothpaste, man. They didn't have fluoride in their water, man. They didn't have red dye 40. And because of that, their third eye was so wide open that they were able to use telepathy to communicate, and then also telekinesis to build the pyramids. And then that's when you've gone too far. And then you take it back a little bit. But anyway, that's just what some people believe when it comes to things under the umbrella of ESP. So it's just kind of this cool question, right? Like, are some people born with it? Or maybe it's Maybelline, can children access this? Is it a child thing? Is it an autistic thing? Is it a neurodivergent thing? Is it a tuned in person thing? Is it something that all humans can do? And what else is kind of really cool too is all of these stories of just children in general being a little bit more tapped in. You ever hear those creepy stories that, like, if my child ever did this to me, I feel like my heart would stop. But they'll be like, oh, I was hanging out with my friend today. And you're like, okay, yeah, your imaginary friend. Who are you hanging out with? And they will be like, Pam. And Pam was telling me about how when you were a daughter, you were so beautiful and how she loved to make lasagna this way. And you're like freaking out because Pam is that kid's dead grandmother who they never met. Your mother, and everything they say about Pam is exactly who she is. And it's like, how are you saying this? And it's like, I hang out with Pam all the time. I talk to her in my dreams. Like, all of these kids who, sometimes say that they see ghosts or they know things about other people who have died, or they talk about their past lives. Ooh, it's kind of creepy, but kind of cool. And is that something that kids can do because they haven't ingested enough fluoride? So who knows? And I think the very last thing I'll say here is if telepathy exists between certain individuals, some individuals, all individuals, it's just such a cool idea. And then it takes you to, if that, then what else, right? If we're able to engage in telepathy, why not telekinesis? Why not teleportation? Do you want to know why? Because United Airlines is stopping us from harnessing the energy, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I think it just, at the end of the day, to me, this kind of falls under the realm of magical things that could be out there. And it's also not that crazy because there's so many things back in the day that we were like, oh, like an apple falls from the tree to the ground. Like, that's magic. Like, we didn't have the name for gravity until we did. And who knows what's going to happen. So anyway, that is just a little bit about telepathy. There's so much cool stuff that goes into all of this. I think the aspect of animals and how they communicate is really cool. And then also the fact that the CIA is putting money into this. I feel like that means that there must be something to it, right? So let me know what you think about all of this. Are you listening to the telepathy tapes? Are you telepathic? Don't even leave me a podcast review. Just send 5 stars into my mind and I'll know exactly what you're talking about. But maybe for the other people who are, having too much toothpaste and stuff, you could actually leave 5 stars and let us know as a review. If you want to check out more Fluently Forward, of course, patreon.com/fluentlyforward. We've got way more stuff. We did a little thing on last week on the Golden Globes, everything that happened with it there. A little mini deep dive on Nikki Glaser, who crushed it at the Golden Globes, and then a little mini deep dive on Lily Rose Depp. So patreon.com/fluentlyforward if you want to check that out. And I will see you guys soon for another mini episode of Fluently Forward. Bye, guys.